Hello, hope you're doing well. I wanted to jump right back into it and cover relative valuation. What I've decided to do is actually break it into two sections. So I have 7A and 7B. Just starting off with the general introduction, and then I'll extend the point and kind of gets into some specifics of how we use certain metrics, adjustments we need to make, perspectives to consider. But up front, I just want to cover the introduction. The introduction just means what do we mean by relative valuation? So let's get into that right now. The general idea here is that, or what is this called? Relative valuation, which is also called using multiples or comparables or comparable analysis or comparable multiples-based valuation. Different ways of saying the same idea. We're basically trying to collapse the process of valuation into a multiple of a payout or some other item of accounting information. And so the basic math here, and not debating payouts or anything else right now, the basic math that we're going to talk about is the value of something, which we will apply to companies, but really just the value of something is equal to a payout, like an expected amount we get, times a multiple that we'll choose. And we'll talk about how we do that later. But this is going to be related actually to the math of the mathematical approach of using a perpetuity that I'm going to show in 1 second. But this is just a way of saying, hey, I want to get a valuation. The idea of being relative is that if other companies or other arrangements have payouts and they're already being priced by a market, we can look at how other things are priced and say something along the lines of, look, if everybody is pricing companies at 20 times their earnings, then if we have a new company that's not priced yet, not sold, in a marketplace yet, we could say, well, if everything else is priced there, we could price this same company at 20 times its earnings. In that case, the earnings is the payout and my multiple is 20 times. My relative valuation, without debating this at all, is saying everything else is priced at 20 times. So my new things, a starting point for what its value could be, would be to price it at 20 times its earnings, just like everything else is priced out. This is meaningfully different from doing an intrinsic model of valuation, but they're both trying to estimate value. So that's where they're the same. And in intrinsic value, which we've covered in the prior classes, we're just kind of walking through and saying, look, here's my estimate of the company's revenues and operating expenses. And we translate those to cash flows and discount them back and say, if I expect this financial performance, the revenues and expenses that drive cash flows, discount them back. What does that translate to in a present value term, like in a value today? That's more involved. This is another way of doing valuation. How are they the same? They're both using data to estimate value, making assumptions and using estimates to estimate value. So they just want to emphasize both can be done. They can also certainly be done together, as we commonly see. A benefit of using relative valuation is much shorter. It can be a simpler process. I don't, however, as I go through this, want to simplify it so much to say that that's all we need. But a starting point for valuation is to say, how are things like the particular investment security arrangement or company being valued? And we could consider pricing the new investment security arrangement or company in a similar way. All right. What are the common ones we see? And I actually will dig into these in the extension topic, dig into how to use them in the extension topic. Price to earnings is a version of this. We talk about valuing companies as a multiple of their revenue and valuing companies as a multiple of EBITDA. We'll get into all these. Let's just keep going. So what's one way to think about this? Well, I really want to emphasize again, and this is really true. It's such a core idea of all valuation, how essential it is to understand accounting information, not in terms of the theory of valuation. That's firmly kind of in the realm of finance, but the application of valuation. Because all valuation is basically trying to figure out what's the company's financial performance, accounting information, and what's our expected financial performance, accounting information, bringing that all together. So in this case, the general assumption of relative, when we're using relative valuation, is that the value of a company, an arrangement, a security, whatever it is, approximates a multiple of a payout if the payout represents a realistically probable and representative outcome. I actually want to emphasize that we don't need accounting to just come up with an answer. Something times 20. Sure, I'm done. I have the easiest way to get valuation, just make it up. But it's like, wait, role of accounting information is to ensure this is true. And to be clear by that, I mean that the item we're looking at and the way we're doing valuation or the way we're collapsing valuation is still based on a realistically probable and representative outcome. And so that's really the value of accounting in this whole process is not what do I do? Is it multiplication, division, that kind of stuff? We don't really play a role. It's how do I motivate certain items that I'm going to use, and how do I make sure I can compare those certain items, all of which I'll get into in my extension topic. And how do I, as a result, how do I make sure that like my application of valuation is correct? All right. So hugely important to kind of understand the aspects of accounting here. With that, let's just jump into this, which is the general idea of the math here, not applied to a specific company yet. So the math of using multiples or relative valuation is actually kind of a similar idea we'd see mathematically to a perpetuity. So a perpetuity, and hopefully you saw this, covered this in the present value stuff. Perpetuity value is mathematically the payout divided by the discount rate that should be applied. So to show this, if my payout is 12, my discount rate is 10% or 0.1, my value is mathematically 120. If you've never done that before, throw it in a calculator, make sure you're good on it. But I'm just kind of showing that there. So what's another way to look at this, though? Well, the same thing would work. What if I change the payout? What if the company made less money, all else out equal? Well, naturally, then my value should go down. So if it's a function of the payout, and I'm assuming the risk is the same as represented by the discount rate, my value should be higher with a higher payout and lower with a lower payout, as we see right here. All right. So naturally, right, the more something generates in income, right, just to think kind of a core way of thinking about this, the larger its value should be. So if I hold risk constant, I've got two projects, one generates more income, I hold risk constant, the one that generates more income should be worth more. And mathematically it is, right? And we're not coming up with, why did I come up with my numbers here? Because they're all just kind of straightforward. That is absolutely the case. All right, I got to do another example of this. So what do we have here? I could also say that, well, what if I, the individual, like decide to change my multiple? Well, naturally, mathematically, that would change it as well. So if my multiple initially is 10, right, 10 times a payout of $10 is going to give me a valuation of $100. But what if I have a reason to increase my multiple now from 10 to 15? Mathematically, again, I'm choosing easy numbers here. My value needs to go up. So we're not really getting into, would my value go up if I were to increase my multiple? Of course, that's math. This is, again, where I'd actually get it like, okay, what's my understanding of the business and the role of accounting information to kind of make sure this all makes sense? It's not the math of this. That's just basic math of perpetuity. It's the next piece here. Because a higher multiple will mathematically lead to a higher valuation, right? We want to make sure that, and I'm not doing this here, it's just a math example, but in reality, with a company, we need a reason for that higher multiple or that higher factor. What are the reasons we should consider? A higher future revenue growth or future revenue growth rates, higher future margins or lower, I'm sorry, I said that wrong, or lower risk for the underlying arrangement. So why is that the case? We should be, and I probably should have italicized that, we should be willing to pay more per dollar of current earnings if these value increasing aspects are in play. Again, being that, well, future better revenue growth, future better profitability, lower risk. If all those things were true, right, and I'm not applying this to a company, we should be rationally willing to pay more. All right. Let me go through another example of that, just showing that very specifically with a discount rate. So in this case, if my initial discount rate was 10 to keep the math easy, but like what if I had reason to motivate a lower discount rate? Well, in the same way, if I hold my payout the same, right, then I would be arguing in this case, this is not really like a numerator effect, it's a denominator effect. But if I was to say that my denominator, my risk is lower, it is the denominator, but the main point is the risk is lower. Well, then I should be saying that my risk is lower, therefore my value should go up. Well, what's one way we could approximate that? I could increase my multiple. So in this case, because my risk is lower, my discount rate, we're assuming I got these right, should not be 10, but should be 5. Even with the same payout, I would mathematically need to increase my multiple to represent that reality. So if I have evidence that the discount rate is lower, I should be increasing my multiple to represent that. And the result of it is the value should go up. That must make sense, right? If the factor is based on the business itself, and we're just assuming that I'm right here, my discount rate is not 10, it's 5. The lower discount rate is the same as, mathematically the same as, a higher valuation factor, higher valuation multiple. And again, the less risky something is, the more it should be worth, right? So that's the way the math of this should work out. All right. And that is actually it for this one. I will jump into the extension. I thought I had one concluding slide, and I don't. Hopefully, don't mind. I'll jump into the extension and cover some applications of this. Talk a little bit more about price to earnings ratios, some issues we have with using EBITDA and revenue as a multiple, et cetera. So hold on tight. We'll jump into that just right now.